Jason Statham walks into a quiet diner for a simple meal, but when he hears the waitress crying in the kitchen, everything changes. What starts as an ordinary morning spirals into a powerful journey of compassion, redemption, and a twist that will leave you speechless. Watch as Jason uncovers a hidden truth that connects a sick child, a forgotten promise, and a photo that changes his life forever. Like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on this heartwarming story that's already inspiring millions. It was a Wednesday morning cloaked in a kind of gray stillness that only small towns seem to wear so well. Too late to be morning rush, too early to be lunch traffic. The clouds hovered low, and the streets glistened with the aftershocks of a lazy spring drizzle. Jason Statham, dressed down in a black hoodie, a plain gray t-shirt beneath, and dark jeans, parked a modest rental car outside a roadside diner in upstate New York. He hadn't planned to stop here, not really. His schedule was open, rare for once. No shoots, no press, no handlers hovering over his shoulder. He'd taken a brief sabbatical, driving himself upstate to breathe for a few weeks. After years of living in a world of lights, explosions, and the unrelenting echo of his name being shouted from every direction, anonymity was a luxury. And this diner, Kathy's Corner, looked like the kind of place that didn't care who he was. Just coffee, scrambled eggs, and peace. The bell above the door jingled softly when he stepped in, and a few patrons glanced up, but just briefly. There was a man in a trucker cap sipping lukewarm coffee by the window, two elderly women chatting near the far wall, and a couple in their 30s sharing a plate of pancakes and staring blankly at their phones. The decor hadn't changed in 40 years. Red leather booths, a jukebox that probably hadn't played since Bush's first term, and framed black and white photographs of customers long past. The walls told the story of the place, unchanging, familiar, and safe. He sat at the counter, folding his hands together and letting out a slow breath. He didn't wear sunglasses. He didn't hunch over to avoid attention. Jason Statham wasn't afraid of being seen. But something about the quietness of this place encouraged stillness. A waitress came by, maybe 24, with a pencil behind her ear and a pad in hand. Her name tag read Emily, and her eyes held a tired kindness, like someone who'd learned too young how hard life could hit, but still smiled because surrender was never an option. "Morning," she said without recognition. "Coffee." "Please," Jason replied, giving a small nod. "Black." She poured from the pot she'd been carrying and handed him a menu. Her hand trembled just slightly, and she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear in a nervous tick. She turned away before he could say anything else. He looked down at the menu, but the words didn't really register. His senses, honed through years of training for fight scenes and tactical situations, told him something wasn't right. It wasn't danger, at least not in the usual sense. But there was a tension in the air, something unspoken. It was in the way Emily avoided eye contact, the way the cook in the back yelled orders that never seemed to be acknowledged, the way the clock on the wall ticked too loudly, like it was measuring something more than time. He ordered a plate of eggs, toast, and hash browns when she returned, her smile visibly forced. "Coming right up," she said with a weak attempt at cheer. Jason gave a polite smile in return, but watched her walk away, noticing that her shoulders sagged under some invisible weight. Something was wrong. As he waited, he sipped the coffee and let his mind wander. He thought about the letter he'd gotten from his mother 2 weeks ago, how she'd written about an old neighbor who had passed, and how time seemed to be speeding up these days. He thought about the last film he shot, how the explosion scenes no longer thrilled him, how the lines felt stale, like he was acting in someone else's life. He thought about the fan he'd met in a grocery store last month who cried when he signed her son's cast, and how odd it felt to be someone's hero when he wasn't sure what he believed in anymore. But then he heard it, faint but unmistakable, a soft, muffled sob coming from the kitchen. It cut through the hum of conversation like a needle sliding across vinyl. Jason's eyes immediately shifted toward the swinging door that led into the back. He looked around the diner. No one else seemed to hear it. Or maybe they did, and they'd just grown used to ignoring it. The waitress, Emily, hadn't returned in several minutes, though his food should have been out by now. The cook's voice, once boisterous and annoyed, had gone silent. Jason set down his mug and stood up slowly, walking past the counter and toward the kitchen. No one stopped him. No one even looked up. It was as if the world had slowed to a whisper, waiting for him to move. He pushed through the door quietly and found himself in a modest kitchen. Dated appliances, a lined grill, and a shelf of canned vegetables. And there, hunched in the far corner near the industrial fridge, was Emily. Her apron was bunched in her fists, and her body shook with quiet sobs. She didn't hear him at first. "Emily," Jason said gently, keeping his voice low. She flinched and quickly wiped her face, turning away. I'm sorry. You shouldn't be back here." "Don't worry about that," he said. "You all right?" She didn't answer for a moment, just took a deep breath, then another. Yeah, I'm fine. Just bad day." Jason knelt slightly, resting his arm on the prep counter. "Looks like more than a bad day." Emily glanced at him, really looked for the first time. Recognition flickered across her face, then faded. Maybe she'd heard someone mention his name. Maybe not, but that wasn't what mattered. "It's stupid," she said, her voice catching. "Just tired. Working doubles. My kid's sick. Rent's overdue. Boss said if I screw up another order, I'm out. My mom's not talking to me because I borrowed money. And then I broke a plate earlier and..." She choked on the words. "I just needed a minute." Jason nodded slowly. He didn't offer empty comfort or platitudes. Instead, he asked, "You got someone to help with your kid?" Emily shook her head. "No, it's just me." He stood up and looked around. "Where's the manager?" She gave a bitter laugh. "He owns the place. He's the cook. That's why I'm hiding back here." He yells, but he doesn't listen. Jason walked toward the line window. The cook wasn't in sight. He looked at the order slips and saw Emily's handwriting, neat but rushed, attached to a plate of overcooked eggs and cold hash browns. He turned back to her. "You're doing everything you can," he said. "And it's not stupid. None of it is." "I don't want pity," she said softly. "You're not getting any. Just facts." Emily looked like she wanted to argue, but her face collapsed into another wave of silent tears. Jason pulled a napkin from the counter and handed it to her. "Take a few more minutes. I'll take care of things out there." She blinked. "You don't have to." "I know." With that, Jason turned, stepped back into the dining area, and walked behind the counter. The trucker glanced up, but said nothing. Jason refilled the coffee pot from the back, poured himself a fresh cup, and then walked over to the kitchen window and took the plate that was waiting. He brought it to the counter, dropped it in front of his stool, then returned behind the counter and began cleaning up the other empty plates. Nobody moved. Not the patrons, not the old ladies, not the couple. It was as if they were caught in some quiet spell, unsure whether they were hallucinating. Jason Statham was now bussing tables in a roadside diner. The bell on the door rang. A man in a blue jacket stepped in, face flushed, eyes scanning the room like he owned the air inside it. Jason didn't need to ask. He could tell by the way Emily tensed behind the kitchen door and the way the trucker's gaze dropped to his mug. This was the owner. The yelling started instantly, and what Jason did next would change the course of that morning in a way none of them could have expected. The man in the blue jacket stormed through the door with a kind of aggression that didn't need shouting to make itself known. His presence alone shifted the air, broad shoulders, heavy boots, grease-stained hands, and a scowl carved deep into his face. His name, according to the sign out front, was Tom. But what struck Jason more than his physical presence was the thick tension that spread through the room the moment Tom entered. Everyone looked away. The old couple leaned in closer to each other. The trucker focused on his empty plate like it held secrets, and even the couple with the phones put them down for a second, eyes darting to the commotion like animals catching the scent of something dangerous. Tom didn't notice Jason at first, or maybe he did and didn't care. He walked straight toward the counter, scanning for Emily, shouting over his shoulder, "Emily, what the hell are you doing? You got 3 tables waiting. If you think I'm paying you to cry in the damn freezer again." Jason set down a clean coffee cup with a quiet clink, standing behind the counter with the calm of a man who'd faced armed gangs and walked away with nothing but a scratch. "She's taking a minute," Jason said plainly. Tom froze. His eyes narrowed as he registered the unfamiliar voice and then the face. Jason Statham, in his diner, standing behind his counter, holding a rag and a look that could melt concrete. Who the hell do you think you are? Tom barked, trying to reassert dominance. This ain't some movie set, pal. Get out of there before I call the cops. Jason didn't flinch, didn't blink. You can call whoever you want, but maybe deal with your staff first. Tom stepped closer, trying to loom. That girl's always crying about something. Wants sympathy for doing the bare minimum. I've given her more chances than she deserves. And I don't need some Hollywood clown telling me how to run my place. Jason's stare didn't waver. What she needs is a break. What you need is to shut up for a second and listen. Tom scoffed and moved as if to push past the counter. But Jason's hand shot out, fast and controlled, palm open, not violent, just stopping him cold. His voice dropped low, nearly a whisper. You lay a finger on her, or anyone else, and we're going to have a much longer conversation. There was a beat of silence. Tom looked down at the hand on his chest, then back up. And for the first time, there was hesitation in his eyes. Not because Jason was famous, not because he recognized him, but because he sensed the stillness of a man who knew exactly how to handle violence without ever having to raise his voice. Tom huffed and stepped back. You don't know her like I do. Single mom, chip on her shoulder, thinks the world owes her something. I gave her a job when no one else would. Jason let that hang in the air before responding. You gave her scraps, and she's been holding it all together on those scraps. You didn't lift her, you used her. Big difference. The door to the kitchen creaked open, and Emily appeared, face pale, eyes wide. She hadn't expected a confrontation, certainly not one on her behalf. Her voice was small. Jason, please. It's not worth it. Jason turned slightly, his tone softening. You're worth it. That's the point. That sentence landed in the diner like a thunderclap. The trucker straightened in his booth. One of the old ladies clapped her hand over her mouth. And Tom turned red in the face, but said nothing. He stared at Jason, then Emily, then the room full of people silently watching him, and realized, maybe for the first time, that he didn't hold the power he thought he did. He grumbled something under his breath and stormed into the back, slamming the kitchen door behind him. The tension didn't evaporate immediately. It hovered, uncertain. But then Emily let out a shaky breath and stepped fully into the dining room. Jason offered her the rag he'd been using. She laughed quietly, tear-stained but somehow stronger. Thank you, she whispered. Jason nodded. You're stronger than you think. The moment passed, and slowly, life returned to the diner. The trucker asked for more coffee. The couple resumed, scrolling through their phones. The old ladies exchanged looks that only grandmothers can, somewhere between pride and disbelief. Emily returned to the counter, tying her apron tighter, her spine straighter. Jason finally sat down to eat the plate that had gone cold, but he didn't seem to mind. She poured him fresh coffee, this time with a smile that didn't look forced. You didn't have to do all that, she said. Sure I did, he replied. You reminded me of someone. Emily tilted her head. Ooh. Jason stirred his coffee, the spoon clinking against the ceramic in a steady rhythm. My sister. Emily's face softened. You have a sister? Had, Jason said quietly. She passed away a few years ago. Single mom. Worked nights, raised her daughter on her own. Took care of everyone but herself. Always put on a brave face even when everything inside her was falling apart. She worked a job like this. Same uniform, same fake smile. And no one ever noticed her pain until it was too late. Emily didn't speak for a moment. Just sat across from him at the counter, the world slowing down around them. I'm sorry, she said. Jason gave a slight nod. I see her in you. The way you carry the weight. The way you don't quit, even when you should. There was something in her eyes now. A realization. Maybe she wasn't invisible. Maybe someone had finally seen her. Really seen her. I don't want to end up like that, she whispered. You won't, he said. Not if you remember that you matter. That this life, this moment, can be the start of something else. You just have to decide you're done surviving and ready to live. Her eyes shimmered. But before she could say anything more, a sound echoed from the kitchen. A crash. A cry of pain. Jason was already on his feet. He rushed through the kitchen door to find Tom collapsed on the floor, clutching his chest, gasping. A pot of boiling water had spilled beside him, steam rising into the air. Emily followed seconds later, screaming his name. Jason knelt down, checking his pulse. Faint. Too faint. Call 911. Jason barked. Emily fumbled for her phone, hands trembling, dialing. The other staff, only one busboy, it turned out, stood frozen in fear. Jason began CPR without hesitation. Chest compressions, then breath. Over and over. He counted under his breath, calm but urgent. Come on, mate. Stay with me. Come on. Emily was sobbing again, but this time not from exhaustion or despair. Please don't let him die. Please. Jason continued working. Minutes passed like hours until finally, the wail of sirens echoed outside. Paramedics burst through the back door and took over. Jason stood back, covered in sweat, his face drawn. He watched as they stabilized Tom, loaded him onto a stretcher, and wheeled him out. Emily stood beside him, stunned. He's going to make it, one of the EMTs said as they left. Thanks to whoever started CPR. That saved his life. Jason nodded silently. Emily turned to him. You didn't have to do that. He looked at her, tired but resolute. No, but I didn't want to walk away knowing I could have and didn't. And in that moment, something shifted in Emily. The man she'd served coffee to just an hour ago had not only stood up for her, but saved the life of the man who'd treated her like garbage. There was something poetic in it, something redemptive. She realized that strength wasn't just fists or fame. It was action, compassion, the courage to step in when everyone else stepped away. Jason wiped his hands on a towel and stepped outside for air. The rain had returned, soft and steady. A cleansing rain. He leaned against the wall of the diner, watching the ambulance drive away. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he'd been exactly where he was supposed to be. Not on a set, not in an interview, but here, with a stranger who needed help, with a man he could have hated, but chose instead to save. But just when he thought the story was over, Emily stepped outside with a look in her eyes that would change everything. Jason, she said, her voice trembling with something between fear and awe. I need to show you something I've never told anyone. It's about my son, about why I'm really here. I think you were meant to hear this. Jason turned to face her, the rain tapping gently against his shoulders, and nodded slowly. All right then, tell me everything. Jason stood against the damp brick wall of the diner, his hands still slightly trembling. Not from the exertion of CPR, but from the sudden weight of everything that had unfolded in less than an hour. The quiet drizzle misted the air, soft and rhythmic, like the hush before a revelation. He turned to Emily, who stood just beneath the overhang of the building's awning, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, not to protect herself from the cold, but to hold in the hurricane of emotion rising inside her. She looked down at her feet, then back up at him. I never told anyone this, she said. Not my friends, what few I had left. Not even my mother. I wasn't sure I ever would. But something about what just happened, the way you stepped in, it feels like the world's been waiting for me to tell someone. Jason said nothing. He just nodded, giving her the space to begin. Emily took a breath, so deep it seemed to come from a decade of silence. My son, Liam, he's not just sick. He was born with a rare heart condition. Congenital, they said. Something about a defect in the left ventricle. He's been in and out of hospitals since he was born. 6 years now. The medications help, but he needs surgery. A transplant, maybe, the kind that costs more than I've ever made in my life. Her voice caught, but she pushed through. His father left when he was 2. Said he couldn't live like that, with all the hospital visits and the bills. Said he needed to start over. I haven't seen him since, so I took every job I could find. Waitressing, cleaning, babysitting. But none of it's enough. The waiting list for surgery is long. And even if a match is found, the costs, they're impossible. Jason's brows furrowed. And your boss? He knows. Emily laughed bitterly. Tom? He knows Liam's sick. I asked for 1 day off last year when Liam was in the ICU. Tom said if I missed one more shift, I'd be replaced by someone who doesn't make excuses. So no, he doesn't know the half of it. No one does. She paused, biting her lower lip, her hands visibly shaking. But that's not what I needed to tell you. Jason tilted his head. What is it then? Emily hesitated. Then, with trembling fingers, she reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out a crumpled envelope. Worn, soft at the edges, folded and refolded so many times it was nearly translucent. She handed it to him. I wasn't sure if I should give this to anyone, she said, her voice barely audible. But Liam wrote this a few nights ago. He told me to send it to the man from the movies. When I asked who he meant, he just said, the one that always fights for the little guy. Jason stared at her, frozen. He saw a film you were in, some old DVD they had at the hospital. Said you looked like someone who wouldn't run away. I don't know how he knew your name. He's 6, for God's sake. But when you walked into the diner today, he knew. And I did too. Jason unfolded the letter slowly. The ink was slightly smudged, dispelling a child's brave attempt at sincerity. It read, Dear Mr. Statham, my name is Liam. My mommy says I'm very strong. I don't feel strong, but she does. I saw you in a movie where you beat up the bad guys. I like that. I wish I could do that too. I wish I could make the doctors go away and make my mommy not cry. She thinks I don't hear her, but I do. If you're real and you ever see this, I just want to say thank you for being a hero. Even if you can't help me, it makes me feel like someone like you might care. That's all. Love, Liam. Jason didn't speak. He read the letter again, then folded it with reverence and tucked it into the inside pocket of his jacket, over his heart. He looked up at her, and something in his eyes had changed. Not pity, not even sympathy. Purpose. Where is he? Jason asked, his voice lower, heavier. Emily blinked. At home. Our neighbors watching him. I couldn't afford another hospital stay after last week. They let me bring him home with oxygen. But I can take you there. It's not far. Jason didn't hesitate. Let's go. They didn't say much during the drive. Emily sat in the passenger seat of Jason's rental, nervously twisting the strap of her purse. The town blurred past them. Gas stations, old motels, the rusted skeletons of factories that once powered a generation. It was the kind of place the world forgot about after the mines closed and the tech revolution moved on. But in a small apartment over a laundromat on 3rd and Maple, a little boy waited with a letter in his heart and hope in his veins. They climbed the narrow stairwell, Jason carrying a paper bag of groceries they picked up on the way, insisting without discussion. And when Emily unlocked the door, the apartment's air hit him like a punch to the gut. It was clean but heavy. The smell of medical equipment, old takeout containers, and Lysol lingered. And in the corner of the living room, lying on a makeshift hospital cot with an oxygen tube in his nose, was Liam. He looked small, fragile, but when his eyes met Jason's, they lit up with a force that rivaled the sun. Mommy, he shouted or tried to. It came out thin and breathy. It's really him. Jason knelt beside the boy's bed. Hey, Liam, he said, smiling gently. Heard you've been watching my films. Liam nodded, eyes wide. You beat up 10 guys with a frying pan. Jason chuckled. That was a good one. Liam stared at him like he was witnessing a miracle. Are you going to fight my sickness too? The question hung in the air like prophecy. Jason looked at Emily, who was holding back tears, then back at Liam. Yeah, mate, he said, gripping the boy's tiny hand. We're going to fight it together. For the next hour, Jason didn't just visit. He stayed. He read to Liam from his favorite comic book. He made him laugh with stories from movie sets about fake blood and stunt doubles, and how one time he accidentally punched a wall that was supposed to be rubber. Liam giggled until he coughed, and Jason helped him sit up, soothing his back like he'd done it 100 times. When Liam finally dozed off, Jason stepped onto the small balcony with Emily. The sky had cleared, the sun setting in deep orange strokes across the horizon. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You gave him more than I could have in months. Jason didn't look away from the skyline. He gave me more than most people ever have. She tilted her head. What do you mean? Jason exhaled slowly. When I was a kid, my brother died. Heart failure. He was 12. No one ever talks about that part of me. I never wanted the world to know. But Liam's letter, it reminded me of everything I buried. All the guilt, the helplessness, and the promise I made to myself back then. that if I ever had the chance to save a kid like him, I'd do whatever it took. Emily put her hand over her mouth. Jason, he finally looked at her. I'm going to help him. Not with words, with action. I know people, real people, surgeons, donors. If there's a way, we'll find it. I'll pay for every test, every doctor, every damn bill if I have to. Emily collapsed in his arms, sobbing, shaking. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to break, because someone else was finally there to hold the pieces. But just as hope settled into the night, Jason's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You're closer than you think. But this isn't just about Liam. You were brought here for a reason. Come to the old factory on Oak Street at midnight. Alone, and everything will make sense. Jason stared at the message. Emily read the look in his eyes. What is it? Jason slipped the phone into his pocket. Something I have to check out. She frowned. Now? What's going on? Jason gave her a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Something tells me the story's not over yet. The air was colder now, sharp with the kind of edge that only came after midnight. Jason drove in silence down the cracked and forgotten streets of the town, past flickering streetlights and abandoned storefronts that whispered of better days. He was headed to the old textile factory on Oak Street, a building he had passed on his way into town without giving it a second thought. Back then, it had just been another decaying relic of a dead industry. Now it loomed in his mind like a symbol of what? He wasn't sure yet. The message had been short, cryptic, but heavy with implication. You're closer than you think. Closer to what? He'd asked himself that question a dozen times on drive. Every instinct in him screamed to ignore it. But deeper than instinct, past the muscle memory of 1,000 fight scenes and stunts, was a feeling he hadn't known in years. Curiosity. Not the kind that came with fame or adventure, but the kind that said, this matters. He parked 2 blocks away and approached the factory on foot. The silence was complete. No dogs barking, no traffic, no signs of life. The building was massive, its brick walls weathered and crumbling, iron beams rusting and bowing under time's relentless weight. A set of massive doors stood slightly ajar, and without hesitation, Jason stepped inside. The interior was pitch black at first. Then, one by one, old industrial lights buzzed to life along the ceiling, casting long, eerie shadows. Dust floated in the air like ghosts. At the center of the space was a single folding chair and a metal table. On it sat a cardboard box, sealed with duct tape. Jason stepped forward, slow but certain, senses sharpened. This had every marking of a trap, but somehow it didn't feel threatening. It felt intentional. He circled the table once, then opened the box. Inside were files, dozens of them, medical reports, case files, photographs, names, dates, hospital stamps, and all of them had one thing in common: children. Each folder detailed a child with a rare medical condition. Some had heart defects like Liam. Others had autoimmune diseases, neurological conditions, or terminal cancers. But what stopped Jason cold was that each file had one more thing in common. They'd all been rejected by insurance, marked experimental, non-essential, or unapproved. And at the bottom of the box, beneath all the pain and bureaucracy, was a photo of a young woman. Jason's breath hitched. His sister. He hadn't seen this picture in decades. She was 19, in her hospital bed, holding a balloon in one hand and his own hand in the other. Someone had taken the picture without him noticing, and he never knew it existed. But here it was, on the back, written in faint blue ink. You promised you'd fight for the ones who couldn't. Did you forget? Jason staggered back, gripping the edge of the table, the weight of the moment pressing down on his chest like concrete. Who had left this? Who knew about her? About him? Then a voice echoed through the factory. Come. Male. Familiar, but he couldn't quite place it. I knew you'd come. Jason spun around, eyes searching the shadows. A figure stepped forward, emerging from the far side of the building. Clean-cut, dressed in a worn leather coat, maybe mid-40s. His face was lined with grief and age, but his posture was confident. Jason didn't recognize him, at least not immediately. You don't remember me, the man said, but I remember you. I was in the bed next to your sister in the pediatric wing. You used to bring her comics. You used to read them to both of us. You were like a superhero to two scared kids stuck in a ward full of machines. Jason's lips parted, his mind racing. I was 14. That was a long time ago. I never forgot. After she passed, I remember the way you changed. You stopped visiting, stopped smiling, like something in you shut off. Jason nodded slowly. It did. The man took a step forward. I got better. Not by much, but enough to get out. I never had family, so the hospital discharged me to a shelter when I turned 18. But I remembered your face and your promise. You told her you'd fight for kids like her. And you meant it. Jason swallowed, his voice rough. What is this? Why now? Because I started looking, the man said. After I survived, I couldn't let it go. I started tracking stories. Kids who were denied care because of paperwork. Parents who went bankrupt. And I started gathering names. Yours was always at the top of the list. Not for guilt, for hope. I believed that if I could find you, remind you of her, maybe you'd remember the fire you used to carry. Jason stared down at the files again. His sister's picture seemed to look back at him, not in accusation, but in quiet encouragement. The man's voice softened. I'm not asking you to donate. I'm asking you to join something. A network, not charity. A movement. One that finds cases like Liam's and makes sure they don't get ignored. We don't wait for red tape. We act. Quietly, quickly, globally. We're funded, organized, and invisible. But we need a face. Someone who knows pain, but has the power to shine light on it. Jason looked at him, the weight of years pressing behind his eyes. Why me? Because you're not just a celebrity. You're someone who's been there. And because Liam believed in you before he even met you. That boy saw your heart before you remembered it yourself. Jason let out a shaky breath. And Emily? How does she fit into all this? The man smiled. She's the reason you stopped. She's the reason you listened. We don't control fate. But sometimes we give a little nudge. We made sure she got the job at that diner. Made sure you drove through that town. We didn't force anything, but we created a moment. One you chose to walk into. Jason's world spun, not in fear, but realization. This was all planned. No, the man said softly. It was guided by the promise you made, and the one you're about to keep. Jason looked down at the photo again, then back at the files. So many names, so many stories waiting to be heard. He nodded, slowly, powerfully. I'm in. The man stepped forward and offered his hand. Jason took it. The handshake was brief, but in it the torch passed from one forgotten child to another. From grief to action, from promise to purpose. As Jason left the factory an hour later, box in hand, a new fire burned in his chest. Not the kind made of revenge or anger, but one made of redemption. He drove back to Emily's apartment just before dawn, the first light spilling over the horizon. She was waiting on the steps. I was worried, she said, eyes searching his. I know, he replied, but I had to meet someone. She studied him. You okay? Jason gave a small smile. I think I've never been more okay in my life. And then he knelt beside Liam's cot again, brushing a hand through the boy's hair as the child stirred. Hey, little man, Jason whispered. I've got something to tell you. Something really important. Liam blinked sleepily. You gonna fight for me now? Jason smiled. You have no idea. But what neither of them knew was that Liam's story was about to go global. A single video, taken from a phone in the diner, of Jason stepping in for Emily, had gone viral overnight. Millions of people were already watching. And they weren't just watching. They were responding. Donations, letters, testimonies. The world had begun to move. But just when things seemed like they were on the rise, when hope started to bloom, Jason received one more message. One that would take the twist to a whole new level. This one came in a sealed envelope, slid under the door of Emily's apartment. It had no return address, just Jason's name in elegant handwriting. Inside was a single photo, a child, maybe 5 years old, and on the back, in the same faint blue ink as before. He's yours. Jason stared at the photograph in silence. The light of dawn filtered through the blinds, casting soft gold over the floor. But the room felt still, like the earth itself had paused to let him process what he was holding. The child in the photo was smiling, wide, unburdened, the way only children who haven't yet learned the way to the world can smile. But it wasn't the smile that froze Jason in place. It was the eyes, almond-shaped, deep brown, piercing. His eyes. There was no doubt in his mind, no questioning, no grasping for logic. In that instant, Jason knew. The boy in the picture was his son. He dropped slowly onto the arm of the couch, the envelope still in his hand. His fingers trembled slightly as he turned the photo back over again and again, rereading the words as if repetition might make them less real. "He's yours." Emily saw the look on his face and stepped forward cautiously. "Jason, what is it?" He didn't answer at first, just held out the photo. She took it gently, scanning the image, her brow furrowing. "Who is this?" Jason's voice was hoarse. "I don't know his name, but I know he's mine." Emily's jaw tightened slightly, not in judgment, but concern. "Are you sure?" Jason nodded. "There's no mistaking it. The letter says so, but it's more than that. I feel it. I remember." 1,000 images surged through his mind at once. Moments from years ago, when his life was louder and messier, when fame bled into chaos and responsibility slipped through the cracks. He remembered a woman, a journalist he'd met on location in Paris during a film shoot nearly 6 years ago. Her name was Sophie. Smart, compassionate, complicated. They'd spent a few weeks together, brief but unforgettable. And then, just as quickly as she appeared in his life, she was gone. She'd left a note at the hotel. "It's not you. It's the life you live. You don't belong to anyone but the world." Jason had buried it, rationalized it. He hadn't thought of her in years. But now it all came flooding back. He stood, grabbed his coat, and looked to Emily. "I need to find her. I need to find him." Emily blinked, struggling to catch up. "Wait, do you know where she is?" Jason shook his head. "No, but someone does. Whoever left this photo, whoever sent that message to the factory, they've been following me for a while. Watching, guiding. They know more than I do, and I need answers." Emily stepped forward, placing a hand on his arm. "Jason, don't go alone. Not again." He looked down at her, grateful, conflicted. "I have to, but I'm not walking away from you or Liam. I'll be back. I swear it." She nodded slowly, tears in her eyes. "We'll be here." Jason left the apartment just as the town began to stir. Shopkeepers unlocking doors, joggers braving the morning chill, the world resuming its rhythm. But inside Jason's mind, the rhythm was different, faster, heavier, urgent. He contacted the man from the factory through a secure line given to him in the documents from the night before. An hour later, he was standing in a remote airport hangar outside Albany, where a private jet sat waiting on the tarmac. The man was there, waiting, holding a dossier. "She's in Geneva," the man said, living under a new name. "Sophie Laurent, working as a nurse in a private clinic. The child's name is Mateo, born in late October. She kept it quiet, never filed paternity." Jason ran a hand over his face, stunned. "Why now?" The man's gaze was steady. "Because you're ready now. You weren't then, but you are now. Everything led here." Jason climbed aboard the plane in silence, and as it soared into the sky, he felt something shift. Not a destination change, but a transformation in who he was. By nightfall, he was standing at the gates of the clinic. It was quiet, nestled between the Swiss pines, with warm yellow light glowing from the windows. He asked for Sophie at the reception. The nurse smiled softly. "She's off shift, but she's still inside. Room 3A. Her son's been in for observation this week." Jason's pulse thundered in his ears as he followed the hallway to room 3A. He hesitated at the door, then knocked. It opened slowly, and there she was. Sophie, older, wiser, still achingly familiar. Her eyes widened as she saw him. "Jason, I got your message," he said softly. Her lips parted in disbelief. I didn't know if they'd ever find you. I was told they would try, but..." He stepped forward. "Why didn't you tell me?" She looked down. "Because I didn't want him to be a secret you regretted. I wanted him to be a child you chose." Jason's breath caught. Then he looked past her into the room. And there, sitting up in a small bed, was Mateo. Dark hair, big brown eyes, holding a toy car in one hand and a sketch pad in the other. Jason took a step in. Mateo looked up. "Mommy? Who's that?" Sophie knelt beside him, brushing his hair gently. "That's someone very special, sweetie. That's someone who's going to change your life." Jason walked closer, heart pounding. "Hey, buddy. I'm Jason." Mateo smiled. "Like the actor?" Jason chuckled. "Yeah, something like that." Mateo tilted his head. "You look like me." Jason dropped to one knee. "That's because you're my son." Mateo blinked. The room held its breath. Then he smiled wide, beaming. "Cool." And in that single word, everything in Jason's world realigned. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Jason brought Sophie and Mateo back with him, discreetly. They stayed with Emily and Liam for a time, the four of them forming a strange, beautiful makeshift family. And in those quiet days, filled with laughter and bedtime stories and early morning hospital runs, Jason found a version of himself he thought had died long ago. The viral video continued to spread, but Jason refused interviews. He didn't want publicity. Instead, he used the attention to launch the foundation hinted at in that factory, an underground network that located children like Liam and Mateo, that helped parents like Emily, quietly, anonymously, powerfully. He gave the movement a name, The Promise, because that's what it all came down to. A promise made in a hospital ward, a promise made at a diner counter, a promise made to a boy holding on to hope with two small fists. And he kept it, every single day. Years later, long after the media storm had passed, after the world had moved on, Liam would walk across the stage in a navy blue cap and gown, heart fully healed, future wide open. Jason sat in the front row, holding Sophie's hand, with Mateo beside him, wearing a matching cap in solidarity for his brother. After the ceremony, a young reporter approached Jason with a mic. "Mr. Statham, can we ask you a few questions about the promise?" Jason looked down at Mateo and Liam, then back at the reporter. He smiled. "No," he said kindly. "You can ask them. It's their story now." And as he walked away, hand in hand with the two boys who had taught him what it meant to fight for something real, the world faded into a beautiful, earned silence. Because sometimes the loudest thing a man can say is, "I kept my promise."